So we're calling the Select Board Emergency Management Meeting to order at 5:08 on June 10th.
There's Brian. Hey, Brian.
And are there any adjustments to the agenda, Karen?
No.
And any public comment on items not on the agenda? Everybody's muted that is not on the select board at this point, so if you want to make a comment, type into the chat box. I'm going to give a minute because I do see a couple of folks. All right, well, seeing no comments, we're going to move on to select board items. And our first item for discussion is the new highway department dump truck determination to purchase or not purchase. Karen, did you have a format for this? Did you want?
Well, it's on the agenda because we need to decide so Brian can let the vendors know what's going to happen. I kind of wanted to hold it off until next week, but we can't wait on this. So, so what do you have for questions? Right now we have, you asked me to get some financing.
Yeah.
And I reached out to People's Bank. Their rate right now is an estimated 2.50% for a 5-year fixed loan. And Brian and I sat down. We're looking at financing $168,575. So with the interest on a 5-year note, it would be approximately $35,901 per year. So normally what I do is I go out to 5 different banks for interest rates. So usually we borrow from People's because they have the better rate. Now I know Brian, normally we would order about this time and he'd have delivery of the truck in September. And we went through everything that needed work on the truck that we're looking to trade last week. So this is kind of where we're at right now.
And did we come up with an actual final number on that, Karen, or not really? I mean, I think the thinking was that it was going to be about 20. Is that right, Brian?
For the trade?
No, for the work to be done.
The other one, yep.
You said 10 to 15, didn't you, Brian?
It was 10 to 15 for the stuff from Twin State, and then there was
then 3404 for the tires and another 1,000 for the feed chain.
Right.
It was about 20 when it was all said and done.
So, and I know I asked at the last meeting whether you felt, Brian, that if we did this, you'd get a year out of it or more than a year out of it. You had any lights on that one in the last week as far as thinking more about that, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, you just find out as you run it, you know, it's really hard to say. I mean, one more summer with that chloride tank in it definitely doesn't help matters, but
yeah,
you hate to put it in a truck that's better, you know, just to save the one that's already junk.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I don't know.
And do you have, as far as replacing it as a chloride truck, do you have another obvious choice for that?
Yeah, I mean, the oldest truck that we have which would be number 3. I think that one's due in, well, scheduled like 2022 or 2023.
Right. Yeah.
So it's got a couple years left.
Yeah.
Question, is it worth keeping it to just use it as a chloride truck if we're going to get only $20,000 out of it? Will it make the other trucks last longer that they're not carrying a chloride tank? And if we only use it for that, it would probably last a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
No?
it's hard to say. A truck sitting around all winter that got chloride on it all summer makes it so everything seizes up and 6 of one, half dozen of the other, you know. It's something just sitting when it's already rusty. It's usually not the best thing for it, but you still run into that same issue with the, you know, all the emissions and stuff on that, and it being a huge dollar amount if that stuff goes bad. The longer you keep it, I mean, we had one go bad on the last Mac that we traded, and it went bad probably 7 years, 6, 7 years into having it, and it was like $5,000 just for the burn pot part of it, and then it was labor to put it in. It was, you know, it was I don't remember the exact numbers, but if I had to guess, I'd say it was probably $7,000 or $8,000 pretty easily.
And is that typical on those? You know, I know working on certain vehicles, I know a lot of the Dodges, like the Sprinter vans and stuff, you could pretty much set your watch by when the filters were going to plug and when the burn system was going to fail, and the Fords too. And I don't know the Max. I don't know. Is it, you know, can you say that at this many hours, you're probably going to need to service that system? Is it predictable like that?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, that last one went at a lot less hours and less miles and less, you know, just less time than we've even had this one now. So
Right.
I would say the likelihood of it coming with this one is probably sooner than later. You know,
Right.
just based on the last truck that we had that was, you know, almost identical. It was just a couple, maybe even just 1 year older too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but those one of those things that you don't, you know, it's not like you're gonna you keep that in the back of your mind, but it's not something you're gonna replace until it happens.
Of course, no, but there is, you know, planned obsolescence is part of this industry. You know, it's a big part of this industry, and so a lot of the parts are made to last a certain period of time. And I didn't know if there was any predictability to that with the Max too. People come in and ask me this all the time, and in certain makers, it's really, you know, it's really very predictable. So,
truthfully, I expected it to happen by now. You know, I was kind of expecting it to happen here the last couple of years, just based on that other truck, but it hasn't happened yet. So we're gonna keep going until it does.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Karen.
Brian, you mentioned that the tailgate is pretty well rusted on that truck. Now, if that breaks, right, and we have to weld it shut, does it render that vehicle, do you still have 100%, you know, usage out of that vehicle?
Well, it's not so much the tailgate itself, it's the structure that holds, it's the side of the body is what is really the problem. You know, when you take that tailgate off there, you lose all your structural integrity of that whole body. Just the side sticking up with nothing tying it together. And yeah, I mean, if you had to weld the tailgate shut on a truck, you might as well get rid of it, because you need to be able to dump stuff out. But
And is that the only answer if the tailgate breaks, welding it shut, or is it something that's repairable?
Well, I mean, if it was just welding the tailgate shut on the truck and that was the solution, that would actually be easier than what the actual problem is. The problem is those back 2 corners, especially on the driver's side, because that's where your salt sits on the road. So that's where your you know, all your splatter comes off mainly on that side, or worse than the passenger side of the truck, is that structure of that holds that all together is combined with the chain and the feed system for the sander. So it's super complicated to get in there, and you know, it's not like you can just put a bunch of metal gussets in and weld them in different places, because all that chain system is all in the way. You can't really, where the gussets are on it right now is basically the only spots they can go, and those are the spots that are all rusted out, because that's where they connect, and that's where you know, it's kind of a catch-all, because that gusset's in there, so the salt sits on top of it, and there's not really many other options as far as, you know, as far as welding that up and making it, you know, structural again.
I'd asked you a similar question the last time we spoke, and I guess I just want to rephrase it and see what your answer is. Considering the position we're in and the potential that in the town will be lower, and recognizing the needs of the town right now, and how unstable these times are, and you having business experience and knowing this truck as well as you do, and the needs of the road crew as well as you do, if this were your decision to make, just your decision to make, what would you do?
Well, I mean, really, it's easy to say compare it to your own business or whatever, but the trouble with your own businesses is that if you don't have any work, your stuff is sitting. You're not using it, and therefore it's not breaking because you're not using it.
Yeah.
With the town, regardless of the, you know, funding that's there, to a certain extent, the work still has to happen, because people still have to get places, and if so, it's a tough call. I mean, I'm not
really asking that you compare it to your business. I'm just asking because I know that you have business experience, and just drawing some of that knowledge in as you're thinking about this. I'm just curious, if it was your call, what choice you would make.
Can I skip that one and you ask me another one?
Call a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm asking this question because I am not an expert in this field. You are, and I, you know, David's probably the closest expert we have, but I think even he has said that this isn't, it's in his wheelhouse, but it's not entirely his expertise. And so I really, it's important to me to know what you feel your crew needs at this point, and taking into consideration where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, if it's my opinion, you know, I mean, there's a reason we schedule this stuff and try to stay on schedule with keeping replacements and trying to keep our maintenance costs sort of flatlined. And the more you put stuff off, the more repairs you're going to have. And we, you know, we're usually pretty, if there's one line item that we're usually pretty tight on, it's our maintenance. And if you're going to add a 10-year-old another year to a truck that's, you know, you've actually kind of skipped by this winter, we actually had minimal maintenance on it, you know it's coming. And, you know, I guess if it was if it was up to me, I would probably do it. But
bear in mind, it is up to us, so we're not going to put it on you. We will own this.
I mean, it's a tough one. I just,
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, one way that I'm thinking of it, Laura, from that perspective is that if we're pretty darn sure that we're going to spend 20 on it, or we know we're going to spend close to 20 on it, and we know there's a not insignificant possibility that we could spend another 7 on it because of the emissions, because it would appear that it's sort of past due on that. You know, that's a total of 27. If our payment is 36, you know, is it worth a $10,000 risk? Because I can't imagine that a year from now, we aren't gonna want to / need to get rid of that truck. And I'm fully aware that we could probably keep that truck going for years if we chose to, but only by doing a lot of work on it all the time. And that's a tough equation with us. But, I think if we look at that trade-off between what we're likely to spend in the next year and what we would if we bought a new one, and we're only going to get a year out of it, it's not a huge amount of savings. And there are some other risks involved. I mean, you blow an engine and the thing is worthless. And I know on that truck, or I believe on that truck, the likelihood of that is very low. But there's certainly a possibility that that bed's going to fall apart or something else that's going to render it a whole lot less valuable. And I'm guessing its trade-in will be at least several $1,000s less a year from now. So it's almost costing us as much to hang on to it for a year as it would to make the payment on a new one. If we thought we were going to get 3 years out of it by investing that, I would think that would be a great idea. If we really think we're only going to get a year, that seems like it might not be a great investment. But
the other thing is like with that 1 ton, you remember when that happened,
right?
I think it was February, we bent a crankshaft in the motor of that truck, and nobody would actually even take the thing to trade. So it sits at the garage out back because nobody wants it. You can't. I've tried to get rid of it a couple different times, and nobody wants it. It was a money pit, and we ended up going from having a $10,000 to $12,000 trade-in on a 1 ton, and instead we had to buy the whole thing, which was not great.
I have a public comment from Doug Grant, who texted me this. He says, regarding dump truck and fire engine purchase on today's agenda, can you give a request, if not already available, PM 2.5, PM 10, NOx, and other emission standards for these and existing diesel engines in Putney's fleet? He goes on to say, I've challenged idling dump trucks standing next to my front door via Putney's no idling resolution 2007 exemption 3 by phone and email to Karen, and she provided the PDF of the resolution. If the emissions are clean diesel, ZEV, and idling does not foul the air, I will stand down, but I'm wondering how our drivers are instructed RE idling exemption 3. Some of that's slightly off topic, but still pertinent, I guess.
Okay.
Well, it's not. I would say it's not pertinent to the discussion we're having about the truck. I think it's a valid point, but it doesn't have anything to do with. I think that. Well, it's certainly a conversation I've had with Karen, and with Brian, I think, and it's something that needs to be an ongoing conversation, but it doesn't influence our decision about buying a truck or not.
Right.
Well,
Or
does it?
My decision anyway.
Okay. I guess the question is, would the new truck have, it would obviously have a higher emissions standard than the current one, I would assume, based on evolving technology. And
it has to pass standards or they wouldn't be able to sell it. So
yeah. So
I believe it's definitely up to the current standard, whatever the standard is, that's what it has to be for them to sell it. And I'm I'm almost positive that it's the same. I don't think the standard has changed since that truck, but I could be wrong on that. There was like a TR4 interim motor emissions setup and TR4 final, and I believe I believe it's the same, but I'm not 100% positive.
And you're all speaking another language to me now.
I know, right?
I don't even know what the PM 2.5 or
I guess, you know,
PM any of that is. So
one question that might be pertinent to this discussion, Brian, that's related to Doug's question is, you know, it has been explained to him that if the trucks are shut down and restarted within a relatively short period of time, that they need to be reprogrammed. And I find that hard to swallow. I think that what he's perhaps referring to is just the fact that he's been told that it doesn't make sense to shut down a truck when it's sitting idling because you may have to work on it as a result of doing that. I find that challenging to believe in today's emissions world, that you can't shut them off and turn them right back on, but maybe I'm wrong.
No,
Brian, explain the regen to
Yeah.
Josh, and we haven't had this conversation with Doug yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the other day when we were on our way down there, the truck actually went into a regen. The trucks will sometimes go into a regen without being parked. So when you park the truck, instead of shutting it off, you push the button, let it continue through its cycle, and then you don't get a check engine light out of the deal. If you just pull up and shut the truck off in the middle of its regen, then you end up taking it somewhere to get it plugged in, because you get a check engine light. You're not supposed to run them with a check engine light. Your email goes off 100 times saying that you're running a truck with a check engine light. So really, when the truck is in a regen, you need to let it go through its cycle, because that's what it's designed to do.
Okay.
for clarity, I'm guessing regen means regenerate, but what does that actually mean?
It's cleaning the exhaust system.
Yeah.
What happens? Nitrous oxide is a product produced when cylinder temperatures are over 4,000 degrees. It's part of smog. It's really bad for the environment. So that they came up with the idea they would lower cylinder temperatures. And the way they lower cylinder temperatures is they inject exhaust gas through an EGR valve, exhaust gas recirculation valve, back into the engine, and it takes up space that diesel and air would take up, and it lowers the cylinder temperature. And when you lower the cylinder temperature, you produce way more carbon particulate. So there's all this carbon particulate coming out the exhaust. They have to catch in a filter, and it plugs the filter. And the way they clean the filter is they dump diesel fuel into the engine for a short period of time, enriching the mixture, and they burn the particulate out. That's a regen cycle. That's really oversimplified, but that's how it works.
Yeah, no. I wasn't aware that when I heard that I hadn't heard that it was during the regen cycle. I mean, my van does the same thing. So, I mean, a check engine doesn't go off, but it just tells you have to keep running the engine. So now I get it. I didn't realize it was during the regen cycle. But that only happens how often, Brian? Roughly, every couple thousand miles or something?
No, it just depends on how you're driving the truck.
Yeah. If
you're plowing snow, using the thing really hard, it hardly ever happens. But if you're doing something where you're just kind of putting around town, if you're ditching along the side of the road, you pull ahead, get a couple scoops with the excavator, pull ahead. It happens more often. But if the truck's running at higher RPM, it happens a lot less.
That makes sense. Mine does exactly the same thing. So now I just didn't have it in the context of the regen, and I couldn't understand why he had gotten this explanation. So,
how long does a typical cycle last in one of those trucks? 10 minutes?
Usually it's about 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Pop up outside of it that says this truck is regenning and needs to be running. So don't worry.
We usually don't sit around with them idling a lot. If the truck's not being used, we usually shut it off because it's waste of diesel fuel, but I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to be out of the thing for 5 minutes and then get back in and do something with it, it's, you know, it happens that it stays running. You don't shut the truck off every time you get out of it.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I also understand how when people could see that, they could, you know, not understanding how it works, they could jump to conclusions and think that.
The simplest way to take care of that would be come ask the person that's in charge on the job, and you would get it explained to you, and it would not go any further than that. But
Yeah.
if that doesn't happen, then we jump to conclusions, and it creates a whole big mess. So a couple questions could answer, you know, and solve a whole lot of problem, but that wasn't the way it was handled, and that's the way it is.
So
Yeah.
to be,
And I imagine that comes up with other people that never speak to you or to us. I'm glad that Doug at least brought this to Karen and us, but I imagine that there are people out in the public that just really don't understand it and don't bring it up. So hopefully they see this and they get an explanation.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Brian. If the world would ask more questions of the people that are informed, we would have a lot less problems.
Yeah.
So as far as that question being pertinent to this debate that we're having, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but that will be true for this new truck as well. Presumably, it will have the same basic. I mean, it will be slightly different, but it'll have the same basic concept of needing to do a self-cleaning process every period of however long, regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this truck will be motor. It'll be almost identical to the last truck that we bought. It'll be, it will be identical to that if we do just buy it.
So I think we can move on from that. I think Doug's question has been answered thoroughly, and I will refer him to the video. And do we have any other questions relating to financing or the actual purchase of a truck that will help us make a decision at this point? Because it sounds like we need to make a decision tonight.
Karen, would you just, I mean, I agree with you that historically, certainly in my experience, people's tends to be, you know, equal or lower than usually in this process, they're equal or lower. Would you still go out to bid to a couple other banks to check financing on this or not?
I would.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And that said, you do need a decision from us tonight, or can we wait for that?
No, I think that the dealership needs a decision from us, and that's regardless of I mean, we don't actually need the financing in hand in order to sign the contract with the dealership. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, no, that's just a commitment to whether we're going to move forward or not is.
Or not, yeah.
I guess my question is, does the select board feel like they can make a decision without that financing information at this point? Or do we feel comfortable with what we have so far?
I'd like to make a comment before you decide, and that is that I maybe comment/question. I think when you were talking last week about, you were asked, you know, if this was your business, would you move ahead and buy the truck? And you said, well, it depended if I had the work lined up. And that makes perfect sense to me. And I guess my only concern still is that we don't know what the finances are going to be. We don't know where we're going to fall. I mean, it seems clear now. When you were saying $10,000 or $15,000 for everything, or when we thought it was that, I thought, well, this might be a good risk to take. And my question to you would have been, can you function if this truck does go down? If you lose this truck, can you still do the job? And I suspected that you would say yes, it would just take longer and be more complicated, because we kind of had that conversation. But now that it's up to the point where it is, it seems like it's not a good risk to me. But I'm still concerned about what the future finances are for us. So seeing this purchase, the picture of all the other ways we could be spending money or not spending money is very important. And I wanted to say that I think this is the highest need, this truck. This clearly seems to me to be the thing that is most necessary, and it makes the most sense if we're going to spend money. And that's what I have to say. So.
Yeah, the other thing I would add, go ahead, Karen, sorry, I know you.
I'm just going to jump one second, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just wanted to make a comment and remind the select board that Brian usually has a surplus at the end of the year, and he's holding a surplus now. So we have to keep that in the back of our minds. So if things get tight, because the state doesn't have revenue to pass down through the municipalities, and we do get a good chunk of money for our town roads from the state, and we don't plan on any major projects that require grant money. So that surplus is still sitting in the highway department budget. So if we have to fall back on something, we have that money.
And that can be used for whatever we need it for?
No, just in the highway department.
In the highway department?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing I would say, David, I mean, I think I've been analyzing this in some ways the same way you have, and I think this is a high need. The other thing, my sense is, and who knows how the finances are going to go over the next year, but given what we're seeing right now in how the economy is responding to things, I think this is going to be a very tough year for some people, but it's not going to be a very tough, it's going to be an extremely tough year for some people. For a lot of people, it's probably only going to affect them in a limited way, if at all. And so, the only reason I'm saying that is because I think that our tax revenue probably will drop, but I don't think it's going to drop by half. I think it's going to drop by, a relatively small percentage. And again, total speculation, but that's sort of what it would appear at this point, is that this is going to be really hard on some people, but not really hard on everybody. So who knows?
That's a fair speculation. Honestly, my biggest concern lies in years to come if this continues on.
I agree. Yeah.
But I think for the coming year, and I think that part of this conversation is about what we can afford throughout the entire payment plan of this.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And as we see the whole picture of things, not just the payments for this truck, but for everything, if the landscape changes in a way that we're affected by 10 or 15% or whatever, how are we going to tighten our belts, and where are the most important places to spend that money, and where and how are we going to save it? We don't know what the funding is going to be. We don't know how the feds are going to affect the state and the state affect the towns. We don't know that.
Yeah.
So
no, and I think your point, Laura, goes along with what I was saying before, is that if this is only going to buy us a year, then we're going to be looking at buying a new truck from a year from now anyway. So it's not really going to shift that whole sort of 5-year equation on this truck. Right. It might delay it by a year, but it might end up costing us quite a bit to delay it by a year if this truck's value plummets in the next year. Is that likely? Who knows? Is it possible? Certainly. Are we going to spend quite a bit to find out? Sounds like it. So, so I guess I would, if you're ready, Laura, I would make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the highway superintendent, i.e. Brian, to go ahead and endorse the purchase of this vehicle.
I will second that. So it's been moved and seconded is to go ahead and take the recommendation of the highway superintendent's, wait, I messed that all up.
Accept the recommendation of the road foreman, i.e. Brian Harlow, and endorse the purchase of this vehicle.
What she said. Is
And
there any?
endorse may not be exactly the right word, but you get the sentiment.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to blame it on me.
No, we're not going to. It's your recommendation. It's not your decision.
Right.
Right.
You were going to recommend that anyway.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion has passed.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda is the new fire truck determination to purchase or not purchase. We have Chief Goddard here, and I'm guessing that some of these other folks that are on with us maybe are here to speak about this.
Yeah, those are all first responders, firefighters.
Okay. So we just received information on this, which I haven't had time to review. Has the select board had time to review this?
This was the long-term debt information, or is this the debt, or is this the information about the bid from?
So you have a couple new documents here. So one would be the E1 bid.
Right.
Tom provided, and he can speak on that.
This is the same one we saw last week, Karen?
Well, no, this is a different one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And then Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, I went out and asked for a rate on a new number. So I provided that to the select board as well. I also provided a schedule from People's United Bank because the select board had asked me to go out to a couple local banks. So that is in your packet. And Brattleboro Savings and Loan also provided a estimate on two different numbers. So I guess we can start with Tom.
So, sorry, before Tom starts, Karen, so these interest rates that you're talking about, neither Brattleboro Savings nor, I mean, we have to, the Australian ballot was a interest
2%.
rate not to exceed 2%. So the
That's
only
correct.
one of these that meets that criteria at this stage is the bond bank.
That is correct, Josh.
That's 1.37. Am I reading that right?
1.37%, which is lower than the 1.45% that we got back in February.
And did they convey reasonable confidence that it was likely to be able to proceed at that rate? Because the last time we talked about that, I think in an open meeting, you said they were very non-committal on what they thought was actually going to happen.
Right. I didn't ask that question specifically because we're going to be looking at a winter pool, which is actually in the fall, Josh.
Right.
So who knows what the rate might be?
God.
It could be higher, it could be lower, it could,
What's the history of it? How does it fluctuate? I have no experience at this.
I
What's
have
typical?
no idea with the bond bank. Normally, it's usually lower than, your regular banks, David.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what they end up doing is, so they'll take all the bid packages and they go out to different loan, like banks and institutions. And what they do is secure the lowest rate. And it could be on $5 million. So they bundle all the packages together and they try to get the best, lowest rate for all of the applications.
It depends a lot, David, and this is super oversimplified, but if the economy is really tanking and inflation really starts to climb, then bonds start to become more valuable because they are a secure investment or a relatively secure investment. You know, given that the Fed did not raise the interest rate today and indicated that they're not likely to raise interest rates anytime soon, that more or less says it's likely to stay relatively stable for a while, but no guarantees.
Not exactly living in stable times.
Yeah. And Tom, I saw in the DeSorcy quote that it said something, maybe that was Karen's handwriting, just saying, ask about financing. DeSorcy would offer us financing or not?
Yeah, we discussed that briefly last week. Yes, the E1 does. However, when we looked at it and compared it originally, it was way out of the ballpark. So it didn't even make sense. And again, like I said last week, I don't remember exactly what those numbers were because it just didn't make sense for us. So I just disregarded it completely.
Okay.
Karen, would you remind me, when you apply for the bond, we are locked in. We have to take it if we approve it, don't we?
Yeah, so what happens is we fill out the application, there'll be a deadline, and we submit it, and then there's one other chance that they'll say, are you committed? Do you want to continue? Once we say yes, then it goes with the other applications as a bundle, and then we're committed at that point. So if it comes in at 3%, that's what we're locked into.
But how do we handle that with the people of Putney?
That's
if
my
it comes
question.
in higher than they approved?
That would be an issue.
We'd be locked into the loan whether they approved it or not through the bond bank, right? There's no way to back out of that with them, is what you're saying, because of the way they do business. Because they need a guaranteed certain number of loans to be able to borrow the money that they're borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
So
when they ask us that question, that final, like, are you in, do they have a really good sense of what the interest rate is going to be?
Yes. So they'll have an idea because they got to monitor it like right along. But the thing is, if we sign the commitment letter for the truck to build it, and then we move forward with the bond bank, you know, I mean, I don't know if they can guarantee us that this rate will look like this in the fall. I mean, even if we go into a recession, you know, those rates might still look as good as this. But on the flip side, you know, we're not going to know from a revenue standpoint where we're going to be at.
right. This feels like the cart's in front of the horse a bit to me.
Now, the other thing too is we wouldn't have a payment until fiscal year 22 on a new truck. And sitting in the public safety budget is like $65,000, which is specific to the fire department.
That's interesting. The trade-in value is $65,000.
So
That's after January 1st of 2021.
Is that for placing the order, Tom, or is that for receiving?
If I can, let me start from the beginning and run through everything. So, like we talked about last week, the base bid price was $746,844. Less the incentives that we were fortunate enough to receive from E1. That brings us to $598,995. That's the actual bid price for the engine. Then, as of now, and up until they're holding this pricing until July 1st. From that $598,995, we then deduct $90,000, which is the trade-in value that they're allowing us on our existing engine. So if I remember right, that brings us to $508,995 for the total cost.
Yeah.
Do we still get the upfront discount?
I'm sorry?
Do we still get the, if we pay upfront discount, the 12.5?
Yes, if we choose to, and we pay the full price up front at the time of the order is placed and the contract is signed, then that's an additional $12,500 off.
But that's not going to happen.
But we
Right.
can't do that. We're going to have to go through the bond bank. We can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
The only way we could do that is through a conventional bank.
Which the
So-
rate is too high.
508,995.
That's right.
Okay.
So as of January 1st, there'll be a $37,000 increase in the cost of the truck, which is it's pretty consistent with what they had told us to begin with a few months ago. So we would still receive as of July 1st, we'd still receive the $90,000. I'm sorry, let me back up a minute. Effective July 1st, there'd be a $37,000 increase, and we'd still receive the $90,000 trade value. That's good through January 1st of 2021. At that point, there would be an additional $24,000 increase in the price of the truck, and our trade-in value would decrease to $65,000. So on July 1st, the price of the truck would increase that $37,000 and would be $995.
Yep.
If we put things off until January 1st, then we're looking at a total increase of $86,000, which would bring us to $594,995. And then after that, all kidding aside, all bets are off. They wouldn't even provide a guess as to what changes might take place, what the cost increases might look like.
I'm curious, Josh, do you have any experience with a bond rate being approved by the town and it actually coming in higher and what that looks like?
No, I don't know. I'm not sure how that works. I mean, that really would be a question for either VLCT or for Larry. Can we commit to that? I mean, I think that the bond bank, I think before we issue that sort of second agreement with the bond bank to go ahead, we have a pretty stable range. The unfortunate thing is that's quite a ways away,
Right.
and these changes in the price of the truck are at least the first smaller but not insignificant change is on July 1st. So that forces us to make that decision before July 1st to the tune of $37,000. And all we can do is look at what the bond bank now is charging and speculating. I mean, if we can get money at 1.37%, that's an exceptional rate.
Right.
Going to stay that way? I certainly have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then what I really don't know, per your question, Laura, is, we voted, or the town voted, including us, well, Laura seems to have disappeared. We voted to not have a rate over 2%. So if we agree to this truck and then the rate comes in over 2%, I have no idea how that works. I don't know whether I'm guessing there are legal implications to that if somebody chose to make it complicated for us, but I have no idea what those implications are and who would assume responsibility for that.
Can I make a comment? So
Yes.
if we waited until after July 1st, 2020 to commit, knowing that the winter pool is in the fall, it would add $37,000 to the $598,995. And then with the trade-in of $90,000, because that would still be good, we would be looking at $545,995 to borrow, which keeps us in line with our article because we stated 550,000.
Right.
So
what we're taking a gamble on, well, yeah, I mean, I hate to see, if we're actually going to do this, I hate to see us add $37,000 to the price tag just because we didn't want to decide, X number of weeks in advance. But there is a risk that the bond rates will change. But there's a risk that the bond rates are going to change regardless of how we approach it. So, I think, sort of along the same lines as the discussion we were just having with the highway department truck, it's a pretty expensive, gamble on our part to try and buy ourselves a year to make this decision. If we're looking at 5 years, we have no idea whether that's going to be tremendously expensive or whether they're going to be, I think the likelihood of the price of trucks dropping is pretty slim, but if the economy is totally tanked, then maybe not, but, then we don't want to buy a truck anyway. So, but those numbers, if we're looking at January 1st, we definitely don't want to add $100,000 to the cost of this truck, or the better part of $100,000. So,
I think,
Laura, can I ask? Laura, you're muted. It's not working.
Can you hear us, Laura? No, apparently not. What was your Tom? Yeah.
The voters approved a total of $550,000.
correct.
We would be looking to bond, well, 509,000 for round figures, 508,995. So $509,000.
If we sign by July 1st.
Yes.
Okay. And we know that right now presently the rate is 1.37.
Right now, yes.
And I certainly understand the concern about what happens if the rate goes above 2% later on. I get that. But if we're bonding essentially 40 what?
Less than was approved.
Right, exactly. Roughly $41,000 less than what was approved. even if the bond rate is 2.1% when the time comes, would we end up balancing out at the end? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that feasible?
Yeah. Well, for something like that, yeah, I totally agree with the equation and how you're coming up with it. The reality of how the article was written was a commitment that it would be under 2%. I don't know how we handle that because it's not we can't control that. So,
Right.
Can I say something too? So when we do our package to the bond bank, they actually ask for the minutes of the annual meeting and the article. So if it's 2.1%, they're probably not going to take our package.
All right.
Interesting. So then if we've already committed to the truck, what happened?
Right.
So
And I know you don't want to spend the $37,000, but you might have to, just to see where that rate's going to be in the fall.
Yeah, but it doesn't even buy. Oh, it does buy us till the fall.
Yeah,
Okay.
It does.
it does. Yep. I'd like to say something, and I'm not sure if this is going to be helpful or not, but it seems to me like the question is more fundamental. The more fundamental question is whether or not we're going to buy a truck or not, just like with the road crew. I think that's really the question, because if we're going to buy a truck, then let's make the commitment now, hope that the bond bank does it, it works out, and if it doesn't work out, deal with the consequences. And if we're not going to buy a truck, if things are too risky, if we're 6 years ahead of schedule, if it's true that the reason we're doing this was to get ahead of the curve, and this is a risky time, then maybe now's not the time to buy the truck, and maybe that's the discussion we should be having, not whether or not we do it by the 1st of July or the 1st of January. Because if things are too risky, now's not the time to buy the truck. I know that there's 2 engines down there. We have an amazing fire department and an amazing chief. I know the job will get done. I'm not worried about that. If we're going to buy a truck, let's make the commitment and buy the truck and get it as cheap as possible. So
I guess and I guess that really speaks to the question that we've asked through this whole process. I mean, we would like to think that the job is going to get done no matter what, but if they don't have this truck, we do have, and something happens with the current truck that puts it out of commission, which is plausible. We do have buildings in this town that there is the potential for there to be some very serious disaster. That was my understanding. Am I?
We have 2 engines, right?
For that?
Yes, we do.
We do. They both function fine right now, correct, right? One was just rebuilt.
Yep.
If one doesn't work, you get in the other one and go.
Right, but that wasn't my understanding of what this particular truck is. This is different than, can you verify?
The layout and the functionality of this truck operationally is completely different than anything we've ever had. The reason for the primary reason for that is because of the fact that we're operating with less people. We realistically have a lot more that needs to be done, and our highest hazard buildings, we're finally properly addressing how to get the proper length hose lays, so on and so forth on the truck.
So I wonder if, and this may be controversial, because I never go there, I wonder if we were to find ourselves in a bit of a pickle, if we chose to go ahead of this, how much support we could ask from the institutions that would most benefit from this truck, or could potentially most benefit from this truck. And That's a big what if and would require asking of them. Karen?
So the schools already contribute about $56,000 into the public safety fund. Now, if
Can I interject just one thing?
sure.
And Laura, I understand, I respect the thought process. However, when I talk about our highest hazard target buildings, I'm not talking just the Putney School, Landmark, Greenwood School. There's Putney Paper, there's privately owned apartment buildings, things like that. So I just wanted to make that known.
I don't know whether Laura.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm on a landline, so I'm hoping it will hold. It glitched out for some reason earlier.
Yeah, I think that, the other thing, and I want to be cautious here because I sit on the board of the Putney School as well, as you all know. Just looking at educational institutions in general, this is a very high risk time for them.
Right.
So, that I think we have two very stable organizations in town, but in a very unstable time. And, I don't know what their ability, if their revenue, either or both of their revenue drops off significantly, then that could affect our ability to negotiate with them too. Because I believe those contributions are up for negotiation in this coming fiscal year. Is that right, Karen?
That is absolutely correct, Josh.
And I can't speculate, and I would not want to have a conflict of interest by trying to speculate on how that might work, but it is something that might play into the equation.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I wonder if it is a conversation that we could have with Putney Paper Mill, where there are more vulnerable buildings. Maybe, I don't know if that's the language you would use around them, but buildings that may need more attention if something were to happen with them. The disaster is potentially larger if something were to happen with them. Are these conversations that we could have with them where we ask them for support?
Karen is raising her hand.
Yeah, I see that.
I just want to make a comment that they are a taxpayer in town. So I would caution, looking at like Soundview and, your bigger buildings in town. And if you're going to look at them, like Tom said, you're going to start looking at, your multi-family housing, your housing complexes that are in town, the co-op, where does it stop, Laura? Just remember,
I agree, and I would actually say that, yeah, maybe a letter goes out to everybody saying, this is where we're at, this is, and we're asking for support. David had said it a while back with things like the library, we would ask for support from people that were able to. I guess I don't really understand why we wouldn't ask for support with the fire department if folks were able to give it. Not demand it, but ask it.
It's an interesting point, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that this is a unique time. It's a time we don't know where the chips are going to fall, and I think that it's a time when everybody, myself included, should look at what we have to offer and what we can do to help the big picture, to help everything. And I don't know how we orchestrate that. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, Karen. I don't know how we would do that. Josh, you've talked a little bit about this in the past, things that happen to help the general store and that kind of thing. I have no experience with this. I don't know what to do, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Donations are a little bit different than what the schools do. There's a whole different level, okay? So I'm not opposed to asking for donations. I think it's a great idea, and I think if people can, I think, it would help. But the schools do something, it's totally different, and that's negotiated. It's like a 5-year, agreement. And
Yeah, I guess my feeling about that, David, we haven't done it on any sort of large scale in the past that I'm aware of. It certainly may have happened very significantly at times further past. I guess my feeling would be that would be something we might want to save until we really needed to, kind of thing. For example, if we were decide to purchase this truck and our tax revenue dropped off by, X percentage over the next 3 years, that might be the time to go and say, hey, we decided to buy this truck because we thought it was the right thing to do. And we still think it was the right thing to do, but it has put us in a situation where it's a burden on taxpayers that we would like to at least minimize, but I do think your point, David, is a very valid one of, are we going to buy a truck or aren't we going to buy a truck? Right. And how do we approach that discussion? And I don't have a good answer to that. I mean, I think that it's always, I think that it's unfortunate, you can see just in the numbers between here and January 1st, what those increases look like. And as Tom said, it's anybody's game what that'll look like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out. If we're looking, I mean, just in the experience of the last truck we purchased versus the price of this one, these numbers just go up and up and up. And, is there a valid way to look at that helps us in that decision? I have no idea. I think we can rest assured that it's going to, if we wait 3 years, it's going to be a whole lot more money and our trade-in is going to be worth next to nothing. I mean, not next to nothing, but very little comparatively. But the next 3 years could be hard.
As we put across at town meeting and prior to that, directly with the select board during select board meetings leading up to that, all the vendors had told us very, very plainly after next year, if we had waited to take it to town meeting, after next year, they were all going to go up the 40,000-ish range. Once we got 3, 5, 6 years out, we were going to be looking at, instead of a base price of $730-ish, we're going to be looking at almost $860,000, $900,000, and that's all of them. That's not just one or the other. That's all of them across the board.
I think what kills me most about this is what's driving that.
I'm sorry, what was that, Laura?
What is driving that? I mean, maybe it's not something you can answer, and it's probably beyond what we need to talk about tonight, but what is driving that? How do they know in 5 years that they're going to be up that high?
Because of their fixed costs that they know increase all the time. But at this point as well, it's all the, not surcharges, all the tariffs that are in place. And they all say the same thing. That's what's driving it.
The other thing that might well come into play with it, Laura, and I have no idea, I'm sure most of these companies that are suppliers are probably already reasonably well paid, but the whole minimum wage movement is probably playing a role in that possibility as well. Once you take everybody in that entire supply line and bump their wage by that much in order to meet a federal standard, that will shift that equation too. And
so I'd like
say about that, but I'll leave it.
I'd like to sit back in a different direction for a second, if I could, please. And that is, I'd first like to say that, I love tools, and I want the best tools I can possibly buy to make my job as easy as possible and to do everything right. And so, I upgrade whenever I can afford in any way that I can. And so I understand the drive to do that, wanting to have a truck to do whatever you need to do the best way you possibly can. If money was no object, do it. Get the best tool you can buy. I get that. But I feel like, are we upgrading in a time that's so risky we shouldn't be upgrading? I don't know fire departments and I don't know fire science, but it looks like for the size of town that we have for an on-call fire department, we have an amazingly well-equipped fire department. And it looks like from the conversations we had at the informational meetings, when I asked, would there be grant money for it? You say, no. Your answer was, we wouldn't qualify because there's so many other towns that have so much more need than we do. And we're part of the mutual aid system. So we have support in the next towns. Are we upgrading in a time when we shouldn't be, even if it's going to cost us more to do that in the future? Is this a need or is this a want? And where do we draw that line? I think that's the question I need answered. Because if this is a need, if it's really a need, and I can get shown that, then we need to meet the need as cheaply as possible. And if it's not a need, if it's a want right now, if we can do what we need to do to protect the people in this community from fire with the equipment that we have, is this the time to upgrade? Those are the questions I have. That's what I need answered to get behind this. I can talk about the money all night, but the money comes after this to me.
From our perspective, the need is going to be in a very few short years.
Okay.
The need is not today, and we've said that right along. The need is going to be in a few short years, assuming that we don't have anything catastrophic occur between now and then. The problem is, and the reason that we brought everything forward now was what everybody is forecasting we're going to be paying for a truck then versus what we're going to be paying for that same truck now, plus the fact that the engine that we presently have, we're not going to be able to refurb that like we did with engine 2.
I remember all this, yeah.
So we also folded into the whole equation, looking ahead down the road another 20 years, have this truck set so that it can be refurbed in 20 years and keep going at a much smaller cost.
I hear that, Tom.
Like we've said right along, this is a significant investment, not only for now and what will come in the next few years, but even 20 years down the road.
I guess the part that I struggle with is that as I look at the chart that Karen provided us with for long-term debt, we would, if we do all three of the things that are proposed, the exhaust system, the fire truck, and the town truck, we're increasing our interest payments alone by $70,000 a year. Just interest, not to mention capital. And we're on the hook for the capital payments for a long time. And that puts us at $5 million in long-term debt. And I know you can't think of it like a regular business, but I have a hard time with that. I have to tell you, I have a hard time with that. That feels like a tremendous amount of money in a time when things are unstable. And balancing that off against, say, the $37,000 that we would increase spending to find out if our interest rates are going to stay the same, seems like makes the $37,000 seem small. Now, it's not small, it's big. But in the big picture of things, am I just coming, because I'm new at this, just coming to terms with the reality of how expensive it is to keep the services at the level that people are used to, and are we going to get people used to not having the services at this level so that we can, run this more frugally or not? Because all of these questions come up for me when we talk about this kind of stuff every time we talk about spending this kind of money. And where is this going to go in the future? Because if we're going to stay at this level, then the answer is we order the truck now. And if we're not going to stay at this level, then how long do we keep the one that we have? When does it stop being okay? When does that truck not meet the need anymore? And do we bite the bullet then? I know that wasn't a very specific question, but those are the things that come up for me, and I'd like anybody's feedback on that.
I want to add, David, that I appreciate your perspective greatly, and the way you ask these questions. And when we talk about the level of service people have become used to, we also have to think about the change in the way we live our lives has developed. And so with the road crew, yes, it's very different than it was when you were a child, but people also travel differently and have to travel differently in order to work, in order to support their families. And that is being challenged during COVID right now, but we're also, it's very different circumstance. So before COVID, for many families, they have to get to work every day or they're going to lose their job. And if they lose their job, they can't pay their taxes. And so they need that road plowed in a timely fashion. And the services of the fire department have increased because building flammability has increased greatly. What the fire departments are facing now are exceptionally different than what fire departments faced 50 years ago. What is in a building, how a building is built, and maybe not so much in Putney because we have a lot of old buildings, and I'm sure, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm stepping outside of my wheelhouse and just talking about things I've read. I'm sure that Tom could speak to this much better than I could, but my guess is the type of fires that our fire department is facing now are very different than what they faced 50 years ago. And my guess is the type of accidents they're facing now on the road are different than what they were facing 50 years ago. So, and the volume of. So as we talk about increased services and the level that people have gotten used to, we also have to think about how life has changed and how needs have changed.
I think
and Laura, you're right, and I'll just put that in a nutshell. The hazards that we deal with, not just here, but every fire department across the country, the hazards we deal with today are much different and much more hazardous than they were 30, 20, 10, even 5 years ago in some cases. That being said, as far as specifically here in Putney, the service level that people expect is not the question. The question is what's needed for our baseline to get operations going before our mutual aid partners can get to us. So with the downtown we have, with the different facilities that we have, with the 14 unit, 20 unit, 21 unit, 28 unit apartment buildings we have that are 3 and 3 stories tall, with the paper mill, with the converting plant, with the motel in town, all those things put together they do dictate what we need in town as a baseline. And what we've got is our baseline. I could never foresee us making a request to add apparatus here, but I certainly would never foresee us decrease apparatus here, because it's our baseline. It's what we need every single time to get appropriate and safe operations going before our mutual aid partners can get here.
Yeah, and I think, that also speaks.
We can document 100 times over the last 20 years how what we do and what we have has made a significant difference ahead of other people getting to us.
And I think that speaks to the difference between your ability to respond with the current trucks you have and the truck that you're looking at getting is the efficacy of your initial efforts would be increased by having that truck. You know, how one computes that to financial value is really hard.
Right.
I mean,
like we said right from the beginning, when the first time we brought it to the town manager and then to the select board, was we don't need a new truck now. We're going to in a few years. We know what those huge cost differences are going to be. So that's why we brought it now to try to cut that curve down dramatically. If we don't do anything now, and I understand the concerns, I truly get it. But at the end of that day, given the fact that we won't even have an initial payment for 2 years, that gives you some wiggle room to a certain degree, anyways.
yeah. So, David,
whether all of it together is worth the risk, that's obviously your decision. But
I hate to cut everybody off, but it's 6:30 and thinking in terms of time, and this is an important discussion. I'm not trying to box it in, but we have been on it for about 45 minutes now. I want to ask one more question, Tom, and then I think that we should discuss whether or not we're going to make a decision. Kind of asking you the same question that I asked Brian. If this was your choice to make, and not putting that on you, obviously it's our choice to make, but if it was your choice to make, what would you do right now?
Given the fact that we know what the cost increases are going to be, and those are going to be substantial, plus the fact that we're not even looking at a bond at a first payment for 2 years, plus the fact we've already got, for all intents and purposes, we've got that first bond payment already in the bank. So we could in theory look at a bond payment actually affecting the taxpayers not coming for 3 years. Given all of that, and also looking at what the interest rates are with the bond banks and what they've done most recently, I would buy the truck. I would commit to it.
So with that in mind, and to keep things moving along, I'm going to make a motion that we continue on with the purchase of this truck as planned.
David, I don't know whether David is participating. He's paused on.
I just had to be gone for a second. I heard everything that got said.
So your motion, Laura, is that you're moving to accept the offer from DeSorcy for the purchase of that truck. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'll second that motion, and then I want to make a comment.
Moved and seconded.
David,
so discussion.
David, to your point about the $37,000 seeming like small money, I agree with you. In the big picture, it does seem like small money. My only response to that is I'm not sure if we were to put it off that we're going to have a whole lot more clarity in November when this bond bank, it may not be any more obvious to us in the fall when the bond bank round opens than it is right now what the reality is, because nobody can predict that. So that's tough. as far as what these three purchases represent, I mean, you know, we have to remember that we're always, you know, part of our role in supplying the town with the equipment that it needs is that we have a constant, you know, our capital program is such that there are always things coming on and always things going off. So, you know, in the same sense that we were talking about, you know, if this buys you a year or two with the highway truck, it's sort of the same in this respect, that if we're buying a fire truck now that would cost us seemingly at least $200,000 more if we were to do it in 2 years, and the likelihood of bond, I mean, a bond rate of 1.37 is exceptional. And I don't want to spend money any more than you do, but if we can bond at rates at that low, our debt load, when you look at the increase in debt load, yes, it's very significant in real numbers. Percentage-wise of what it does to our overall debt load is not extraordinary, and I don't like it. But it's not sort of crippling in that respect. We're not doubling our debt load. We're not, you know, we're not increasing it by 50%. We're increasing it by 15%. So you know, and I'm not arguing against your argument at all. I don't like it any more than you do, but I hate to see us increase our debt load more 2 years from now because we delayed on this decision. And I feel like, you know, we're very much between a rock and a hard place. DeSorcy has put that in front of us, and you know, of course, their business is selling fire trucks. I think we've had an excellent relationship with them for a long time, and I do think they're treating us well. I think they will continue to treat us well in the future, but the reality is stuff is just getting more expensive. And if our interest rate were doubled 2 years from now, that would be very significant. So I don't know, tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. Thank you for that, though, Josh, because it does put things into perspective. And I don't have a lot of experience at this. But thank you. Thank you for that.
Karen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not exactly excited about this either. But I do think that given all the information we have, this is the best decision we can make in the moment. And that works out. Karen, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So I just need clarity. So Laura, you moved to accept this,
The
purchase, to continue the purchase of the truck.
as currently proposed through Dorsey.
Okay. Currently proposed as of what date? Are we looking at right now signing,
Yeah.
or July 1st?
Before we hit the July 1st deadline where things go up.
We do have 2 weeks to keep considering. Do we want to do that or not? I mean, I wouldn't object to tabling this till our next meeting, and I know that might feel silly, but I do feel like it might not be, you know, things are so volatile right now that 2 weeks might make a difference. And I don't have a problem with waiting, and I almost would recommend it, but.
Tommy, we're really okay till the 1st of July. You mean that? We could have this time to talk about it some more, and it wouldn't jeopardize us. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. I would love some more time to talk about this and think about it. You know, there's lots of people coming and talking to me about this truck, and you know, they have way less information than I did, and I have a lot more now, and I would like that time. So,
Well, then I will remove my motion and we can table this until next week.
You don't have to remove your motion. We can just table it, Laura. If you, I mean, the motion can stand and we table it. Either way.
Okay. Then let's just table it and leave the motion in place and we can
Okay.
come back next week.
I'd like to make one really quick comment. I'd just like to thank everybody. Tom, thank you. Karen, Josh, Laura, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. It's not easy.
It's not easy. And
Really hard. We
all of your inputs. Thank you so much. Yep.
like the welfare of the town stands in our hands or anything, you know. But all right. Well, we will come back to it next week. So moving on, the state status update. That's you, Tom.
I'm sorry, Laura, the what?
The state status update is what I have here.
Emergency management preparedness.
Yeah. Management state.
At this point and over the last couple weeks, everything with us and in the area has calmed dramatically. Obviously, the governor's opening things up at a very controlled pace, which is good. I know he's looking at education next and what's going to happen with all education, pre-K through 12, as well as the colleges and higher education. Plans are being formulated for that. The only real high concern at this point is up in Chittenden County with a cluster that's ongoing up there. Everywhere else in the state seems to be pretty status, and we hope that it stays that way.
I believe, Tom, and I don't know whether you know this for sure, but I heard on the radio, actually, when I was headed a few minutes late back to this meeting, that they have decided that schools will open in the fall.
That's not confirmed yet.
It's not?
It's not confirmed yet.
Okay.
That's what the governor is striving for.
Yeah.
But it's not confirmed yet.
Okay. From the way they announced it on BPR, I thought, boy, it sounds like it's confirmed, but I didn't hear them say it was confirmed.
Unless there's been a very dramatic change between this afternoon when we received our daily emails and when you heard that. It hasn't been confirmed, but.
Okay.
And when I read off the agenda, I jumped right to item 2 under your emergency. That's why it was confusing.
Okay. Right. As far as everything in the region, the state has through different means, the most current PPE stocks have been delivered to the departments, and everything else right now is essentially just wait and see.
Do those PPE deliveries, Tom, feel to you like they're sufficient, more than sufficient, almost sufficient for your needs, and both in terms of quantity and quality?
No, in that through all of this, right now we still have here alone, we have 4 open tickets that we're waiting for. Whether we see them or not, I don't know. I know there are several other departments that have open tickets as requested that for things that they've requested as well. Whether they see them or not, we don't know. So no, as far as quantity, it's not. It hasn't been good, and it's not. Given the fact that we're in a lull, so to speak, is good.
Right.
Hopefully we don't see another spike. If we see another spike, then we're all going to be in trouble as far as the amount of material, of PPE that we have. So it's teaching us all some things. statewide as well as the individual departments and agencies that are involved on what we need to do for next time and in the future. So that's the answer to that, Josh. Is no.
And am I safe in assuming that there's nothing we can do to try and influence that?
There's not. The concerns have been voiced. Everybody that needs to know knows. And at this point, there's nothing that can be done to enhance anything. It just isn't possible. So again, we're keeping our fingers crossed that something else doesn't occur right off, or we don't start to see spikes of this virus, and we start planning pretty heavily for next time.
Yeah.
And what is your confidence that, I mean, I don't know, you may not be able to answer this question, but what is your confidence that we're not going to see spikes with things opening up?
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
No idea.
I mean, I think that from an epidemiological standpoint or a medical standpoint, there's almost no chance that there won't be at least some hotspots, but how significant they will be is, I think, anybody's guess, you know. But we're seeing, I mean, just that one that Tom referred to up in Chittenden County, you know, we're already seeing it. The rest of the country is already seeing it as a result of Memorial Day. You know, the reality is more people bring more risk, and that's what it is. Will that play out in large numbers? No way to know.
I will say that I am seeing, for the most part, it seems like there is better mask wearing out in the community, and that's heartening. So I hope that people continue to do that as they're out amongst others and relaxing the other standards a bit. I hope that they raise their mask standards and continue to social distance. Any other questions for Tom? Thank you so much for everything you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Back to you next week. All right, so we're moving on to select board updates, signage COVID-19 in town. I have a little bit of information on this, Karen. I didn't know if you had information as well.
No, I do not.
Okay, so I found out that the banner wraps that go over a sandwich board can be created at Lotus Graphics for $45 each. And we do have several sandwich boards behind the library that we could use. I am willing to donate towards a few of these. So I will try and get that going with the Jersey Cow sign that we talked about. If everybody feels comfortable with that, we'll try to get that going as quickly as possible. And then in thinking about locations for that, I was thinking the general hotspots in front of the farmers market, in front of town hall, and potentially we could talk to Basketville or the school to see about putting one out there. I think the school might be a good place because it's a different side of coming into town.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the school would be amenable. So, anybody have any strong feelings on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think that is great if you're willing to contribute to that. I'm not adverse to, you know, it sounds like a small sum of money. I'm not sure how we feel about taking that out of town funds also, or, you know, something. I don't know, Karen. I mean, if we were looking at, at $45 a piece, if we needed, 5 of them, we'd be looking at $225. I'm not adverse.
Grant, which is up next.
What's that?
I said, could it go towards the FEMA grant, which is up on our agenda next?
No.
Right. We might be able to expense that through the grant.
Yeah.
So let me look at the funding in the, because we're coming to the end of the year. So I'll have a better understanding next week and we'll go over the numbers anyway.
All right. Do you want me to get the process started of that printing, Karen, or is that something that you feel you have bandwidth for, or Alyssa could potentially do?
How many are you gonna do right up front?
I was thinking 3, but I mean, if we're gonna have them printed, we should have them printed all at once.
Right.
Let me check in with Emily and see how many are available right now behind the library.
Now just remember, we have a lot of sandwich boards already in the village.
Yeah.
No.
So it's getting a little tacky. And I'm sorry, but have you seen Town Hall? There's 4 sandwich boards at Town Hall right now.
Yeah.
And we only have 1. And, we gotta be, we have to remember, we have an east side of Putney and then, West Hill up there. So
Well, that was my thought with the school. So the school would not really contribute to the kind of sandwich board clutter that we're seeing downtown right now. I think if we put one in front of Town Hall, we should probably pull our other for the time being. Or
those aren't mine. They're other people's.
no, I mean the one that we currently have out. We do have one, right? The one that your letterboard.
Yeah, and that has an announcement about the school vote on June 30th and the census.
Maybe the general store would be willing to host one, or basket would be
or
willing.
next stage, maybe.
Yeah.
The other place that might be worth having one would be the corner of Route 5 and East Putney Falls Road.
Yeah.
That's pretty high visibility. It's a crowd that we aren't tending to target as much. I was just saying, Laura, maybe a possible location would be corner of Route 5 and East Putney Falls Road.
That's a good one. Yeah.
It's a pretty high visibility and catches the other side of town.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can think about placement in a way that won't feel so congregated.
Right. I think we got to spread it out a little bit.
Well,
it would be ideal if we could have one at both of the on-ramps or the off-ramps.
I was just thinking that too. I think we could certainly,
Putney in.
Fire department.
and or right where West Hill has theirs. I assume that would need the permission of the spinnery, but I would think they would be willing. And then the other one is actually in Dummerston, so that might not be as much up to us, but we could probably inquire.
Yeah. All right. Well, at least we're getting the ball rolling on it. Sometimes it feels like these things take so long. So I guess I did not get clarity on, is this something you want me to continue to pursue, Karen, or do you feel like your office has bandwidth to pursue it?
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want, and you have the image, or do you want me to forward you that?
I think I have it. It's the one that you gave me, right?
Yeah, and I bet if we reached out to the Shelburne Museum, we could get the original, which you might need for printing purposes.
Yeah, that would be useful, probably.
so moving on, public assistance, state, federal emergency, and that's you, Karen.
Yeah, it's actually PUA grant. It's not a FEMA grant. So
Okay.
that opened up, I got notification that we can start submitting all our expenses that are COVID related. So again, we haven't really accumulated a whole lot of expense. We're up to maybe $5,000, and then I will sit down with Tom and go over the slips to make sure they're directly COVID related. And then if we're at that $300 threshold, I'll go ahead and submit those expenses. So this state of emergency too, this grant will stay open until the state of emergency is closed. So when the governor says, you know, things are okay and the state of emergency has been lifted, then we're going to have to make sure we get all our expenses into this grant. But I don't know when that's going to happen.
This, you had under here FEMA grant, was that a mistake or is that something else?
Yeah, I just said that that grant is actually a PUA grant.
Okay. Okay.
So,
all right.
And that's the one we have to meet at least $3,000 worth of approved expenses to be able to apply. Is that right?
3,300, yeah.
3,300, right, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on that? Anybody? Is there any response update?
I don't think so. Everything's been pretty quiet.
I'm knocking on wood right now.
I know. I guess the only thing I want to add is the library is still doing, you know, pickups so people can order books, and I'm not sure when there'll be an opening date for them, like a physical opening date. And that is the same for the town hall as well. So I think there's only 2 towns maybe in Vermont that have open town halls to the public. Rockingham being one of them. So I'm not really sure how it's going yet. But I guess the nervousness is, you know, if there's a possible uptick, you know, with COVID. So we are still doing appointments only. And it's been really, it's slow actually.
I think it's wise to err on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only question I would have is, do you feel that you are significantly disadvantaging anybody by providing the service you are instead of being open? And I think my sense of that question would be no.
No.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
if that comes to be the case, then we'll have to think a little bit more about that balance.
Right.
You know, if you feel like you're not providing a service that you should be providing, then we have to think about the risks involved. But as long as you're not feeling that way,
No, not at all.
keep the risk down.
Yeah.
Folks have the ability to make an appointment and come in and get whatever services they need.
Yeah.
Go through the procedures that you ask of them.
Right. You know, marriage licenses are still being provided. Notary services are being done, and everything's by an appointment. And even with title researchers and attorneys, so appointments are staggered. So there's time for us to clean. And, you know, right now it's been like maybe 1 or 2 appointments a week. So it's slow, but we're managing. People are going to the town clerk asking for information. He's providing it through email or over the telephone. People are still getting dogs licensed. You know, they call, he puts it in the mail. So things, it's working.
Just because you brought up the library, they will be the distribution site for school meals starting next week, I believe.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
It's very different than what it looks like right now. They will not have buses going around town. Families have to sign up and should sign up through the school as soon as possible so that they can gauge what the need is. And then it will be, I believe it's a once a day, or I should actually look at the email before I say this because I only skimmed it, but the drop off, it'll be dropped off in sacks and people will pick up. And there's supposed to be no contact, is my understanding. So,
What's the logic, Laura? Do you know, behind it being at the library and not at the school?
the central location that many can walk to. So
How many
they're
families?
delivering June 19th, and then beginning June 22nd, meals will be dropped off at the Putney Public Library. We'll have to pick them up there. Putney Central School will prepare the meals for the library delivery for the week of June 22nd through June 26th. And then beginning June 29th, the meals will be prepared and delivered to the Putney Public Library by the food service in Brattleboro, and that will continue until August 14th. There is a survey that was sent out by the school that folks should fill in if they want to partake.
What do you know, just out of interest, do you know, I think David asked the same question, do you know how many people this is serving currently?
I don't.
Yeah.
Seems like the school is a much better place for traffic than the library.
That's what I would think too, but the
Yeah.
walking part, the walking part does make sense, but what's the density of people who are within walking distance? I wouldn't think it, but presumably somebody thought this through.
Yeah, and surprisingly, quite a few of our families and children live downtown.
Yeah, true.
So I know that there's quite a few that live in the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Project on Old Depot Road, and there's many of the houses that have been for sale over the past few years have been bought by families.
Yeah.
There's a much larger population of children downtown, I think, right now than there has been in a while. And I say that through observation only.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, just anecdotally, I see more families walking on Main Street than I used to, which is great.
Yeah. So I think that I know that the Putney Mutual Aid was involved in some of these conversations. And I think some of the logic behind it is that there are many people downtown that could walk to the library, but not as many could walk to the central school.
Yeah. And presumably that will not, Emily Gervais will not have to orchestrate that at all. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, but I believe she's very involved. And again, I'm not completely informed on this. It's peripheral. But I believe that part of the logic behind it was that it would draw her in with families that would be likely to use and need the library. And so she could provide services that way as well. It's another way to keep the library very active in young people's lives. I'm sure we could get more on it for next week if you're interested.
Right. Only because I'm interested, not because I need to know.
All right, from there, the recovery update, if any. We're recovering.
I know.
Trying to. Okay. So we have our next meeting date to be determined. I don't know how the rest of the select board feels about this, but I feel like we're in a lull. And I think that it would be healthy for us all to take a break from this while we're in a lull.
Yeah.
And kind of reprime our engines to come back if there's a need. So I'm very comfortable with saying, let's take a break from these emergency meetings until we sense there's a need for them again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to request a brief executive session, Laura.
Sure.
Under what?
Personnel.
Let me see if I can, do you need the wording?
No. I mean, we know it's legitimate under statute to have a discussion about a personnel member
Yes.
under. So I'm comfortable making a motion that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a person.
And I'll
Okay.
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We shut off the recording.
This conference will now be recorded.
We're recording right now.
Okay, so we have left executive session. No decisions have been made. We do not have, our next meeting is, we do not have another emergency meeting set. And our next meeting is next Wednesday. Our next regular meeting is next Wednesday at 5:30.
On the 17th.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Great. All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
We're out.
On.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. I appreciate you all.